between knowing something, and we did this, I think, the first day of class, where I told you I only know like 3 things, right? Knowing and believing. So keep that tension in your mind. And this is really what's going to mark the difference between medieval presuppositions and modern. So when we start modern philosophy, the hallmark of modern philosophy comes from René Descartes, and he posits we have to start with radical doubt. And what he means by this is, don't take anything as a presupposition. Question everything. Now, the 16th century, the church is still very powerful. It's the Protestant Reformation's taken place and all that, but in certain parts of Europe, especially southern Mediterranean Europe, the Catholic Church is very strong and powerful. In fact, Descartes was brought up and raised by Jesuits. And I won't go into who the Jesuits were so much right now, but they were a very powerful faction or sect of the Roman Catholic Church. And so when he rolled out his philosophy, he starts trying to explain to his Jesuit friends and teachers what he's doing. Besides, he probably doesn't want to get lit up, like literally lit up. So he begins by saying, let's start by just assuming we don't know anything for certain. And let's see what things we can actually know without any shadow of doubt that have to be true. And so he begins that epistemological list of how do we know things. And we talked about, we know things through our senses. Well, what's wrong with that? Our senses deceive us. We know things through our reason. What's wrong with that? Well, sometimes we think incorrectly. Descartes, however, was a mathematician, and he had great hope that math might be the key, kind of like the Pythagoreans from the ancient period. Because he realized he doesn't even know if he's dreaming or awake. Like right now in this classroom, are you sure you're in this classroom with me? Or is it 3 o'clock in the morning and you're still laying in your bed and you're so excited about having class with Blackburn today that you're already dreaming about what we're going to talk about?
For sure the second one.
Me too. I don't know, man. Sometimes when I'm teaching so much, I dream I'm in my classes. But for all I know, I'm sitting in some nursing home off Magnolia and El Cajon, medicated out of my mind, drooling on my shirt, thinking I'm lecturing to my class like I was 20 years ago. And I'm just reliving this thing over and over in my head. And I'm just having a great time. And the nurses come by and say, oh yeah, that's that crazy philosopher guy. We got to keep him double sedated because he starts talking funny. So he starts with this idea of, I don't even know if I'm dreaming or awake, but whether I'm dreaming or awake, 1 plus 1 still equals 2. Woohoo! So maybe math is the way out. But then he has a horrible thought. What if there's like this evil, powerful genius that every time I count, 1, 2, 5. So in my head, even though I'm holding up 3 fingers, this evil genius is making it 5 in my head. And so even my mathematical equations are getting messed with. They're getting tweaked. And this is where he has his moment of brilliance. And he realizes whether I'm dreaming or awake, whether I'm thinking clearly or unclearly, whether I'm being deceived or being told the truth to, there is a me. There is a thinker. And I just love this. That is one thing. As long as you're even raising the question, do I exist? You exist. Because there's a you questioning your existence.
I think, therefore I know.
I think, therefore I am. Yes, that's his beautiful little Latin, cogito, ergo, sum. I think, therefore I am. Now, you could almost give a shout out to St. Augustine all the way back to the 4th century on this one, because when he was confronting the skeptics, and remember the skeptics were quite clever, their little motto was, we don't believe in anything, including the proposition we don't believe in anything. Because you have to add that, otherwise you believe that you don't believe in anything, which is one thing. Anyways. He basically is using the same sort of argument. Even if I'm being deceived or in doubt, there is a doubter. There is someone who has been deceived. Therefore I exist. And so then he starts to think about, if I am existing, what kind of things can I know? And he starts to think about, have I always existed, or did I begin to exist at a certain point in time? And he doesn't have an eternal recollection of always existing, so he believes he had to exist. And then he has to ask himself, was I self-caused, or was I caused by another? You see how he's going right back to those pillars from the medieval period. And he starts going through them, and he realizes, I did not cause myself, therefore I must have been caused by another. So now he's got not only existence, but a beginning. He has a creator, and now he's thinking, wow, if I was created by this powerful being, I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have created me for my senses to be deceived. At least that couldn't have been corrected by reason. So now he's got his reason back, and math, and God and all the holy angels, and he's just so happy. So he's used reason, starting with doubting everything, to reconstructing based on self-existence, working his way all the way back up to God. So almost the Aristotelian model, where you're beginning with self or the physical world, and then you're arguing up to these more abstract concept ideas. All right, any questions on that? All right, so I do want you to remember Descartes is the father of modern philosophy, and the shift comes from age of faith to an age of radical doubt. That's what marks the modern era. Unfortunately, Descartes did not stop there, and he came up with this other brilliant idea called Cartesian dualism. And in Cartesian dualism, he talks about God, but he also talks about there being modes of existence. And these modes are seen in thought and extension. Extension would be like physical, like matter. I'll just say matter. And here it would be mind. So this would be mind, matter, or body distinction. Extension is physical things, thought, mental, non-tangible things. And his point he's making is, he's calling them substances, but this is a problem, because according to the scholastics I talked about on our last lecture, the scholastics define substance as that which is self-existing and self-consisting. Okay, one more time. Substance is that which is self-existing and self-consisting. By that definition, how many substances are in the universe? Or can you name even one substance that is self-existing, self-subsisting? No, the sun was created, and it will diminish. Anything that wasn't created or doesn't need anything else for its existence? God. God is the only thing that qualifies by that definition. Right. Very good. Right. So what Descartes' saying, though, he's acting like mind and body are substances, which this is a problem now if we have two substances and not just one substance. And let me give you an example why we're having this problem. Descartes says thoughts can affect thoughts, or minds can affect mind, but mind cannot affect extension or matter. So if I want to get you to change your thinking, I can't just come up to you and whack you upside the head with a 2x4 and pound my good ideas into your noggin. I have to use my mind to get into your mind to change your mind. But if I want to physically hurt you, I can't just sit in the front of the room and think mean thoughts at you. I have to physically pick up a chair or something and whack you with it if I want to physically hurt you. If I want to mentally hurt you, I'm going to use my mind. If I want to physically hurt you, I have to use my body. Does that make sense? Now, I think I have a pretty, can you get a close-up of this? Because I'm going to try, I've tried this every class. And you guys know what telekinesis is? It's where you use mind to move matter. Okay, so I need absolute silence in the room. Now, watch that mug. I don't think I can bring it all the way to my head, but see if we can at least make it move. Are you ready? I'm trying to concentrate here.
Your beard moves a little bit.
How does my beard move? My beard extends out and grabs the mug. Okay. Yeah! But see, I can take a physical object like this marker, and I can go over, and look at this. I can move it all over the place. I'm using a physical thing to use physical. This silly little thing. And even with the greatness of my mind, I can't budge that object, not even a millimeter. What the heck is going on? Oh my gosh, did you see what I just did? I just used my mind to pick up my mug. I was thinking I want a sip of coffee. You missed it. I just used my mind to pick up my mug. Okay. You might say, Blackburn, no, you used your hand to pick up your mug. Well, guess what, people?
And your hand is controlled by your mind.
Yeah, watch this. Raise your right arm. Lower your right arm. I just use a thought to control physical, material reality. Why can I control this and I can't control that? What is going on? Why do I have a mental connection to this physical body, but I can't physically control other bodies with my mind? And that became the problem of Descartes' dualism. If matter can only affect matter and mind can only affect mind, how are we walking around as humans in bodies which we're obviously using mind to move matter? And I'll tell you, if you get sick or injured, it's going to affect your mind. If I'm driving my car and I get a fender bender or something, yeah, it's a bummer and I might be a little upset, but it's not really my body, right? My brain isn't like cyber linked to my vehicle, at least not yet. That's probably 5 years down the road yet, until we can just plug and play into our consciousness, into our vehicles. But if I stub my toe or get my foot cut off, that's affecting me. I'm talking about that's my foot, my body. It's affecting me even on a mental level. And we've all seen people talk about the power of prayer or positive thinking for health and those sorts of things. Just that mental effect on the physical, or how depression, anger, bitterness can actually make people physically sick or ill, right? Mm-hmm. It's amazing. So we do know there is an interplay between mind and body. What we don't know is why or how. Let me see if I can pull up an image real quick for you. Should have had this locked and loaded. Internet. So basically what Descartes is saying is, we have this gland in the middle of our brain called the pineal gland, and we do have a pineal gland. If it does what Descartes is claiming it does, though, we have no way of knowing. Because even if we could put in a micro camera into the brain and say, okay, I want you to think a certain thought, we can't see thoughts. We can see the results of thoughts, and our neuroscience and things like that have come a long ways where we can actually map the brain. We can tell where the smell centers are, where the vision centers are, where the cognitive functions are happening, but we can't see a thought because they're not tangible things. We can see the biochemical reaction, but we can't see the thoughts themselves. So this is what Descartes' theory on all this. He believes that when we see an object like that coffee mug, my thoughts begin to vibrate around the pineal gland. And my thoughts affect the animal spirits within the pineal gland, and those agitate and go down my arm till I touch the mug. Then they vibrate back up my arm around the pineal gland, letting me know you have secured the mug, and now my thought can be bring it to my lips. It registers, and it goes back down. He's basically describing the central nervous system, but once again, purely philosophically. At least up to this point, it was taboo to dissect human bodies. Now, remember, it's the Middle Ages, coming out of the Middle Ages. People probably have seen plenty of desiccated bodies, but you're not supposed to be dissecting and stuff because of the whole image of God and all that. Now, some people would sneak and do experiments on the side, artists, philosophers, etc. But I'm pretty sure Descartes was doing this simply from thinking about how does this happen. Now, by animal spirits, it almost sounds like he's describing, is it called metachlorons from Star Wars?
Yes.
Where you have this stuff inside of you that vibrates and allows you to interact. But it really does sound like the central nervous system. He doesn't mean like spirits, like an animus. He's, I think, just using the language of his day to talk about the central nervous system. The problem is we still don't know that interplay. Like, how does that work? How do we get our thoughts to affect our body? My friend Carl, quadriplegic, brilliant mind, but he could not move his body. Now his parasympathetic nervous system, that's the one you don't have to think about, right? Biology majors? Parasympathetic, is that like your breathing, your digestion, your circulation? Where sympathetic is me raising my hand, leg, that sort of stuff. Okay, so he does not have any more voluntary control below his shoulders, but he still can digest, his blood still flows, that sort of thing. Freaky. His body's still there. He can look at his foot all day long and can't move it, just like I can't move the coffee mug. What is going on? He has somehow been disconnected from his body. Now, at 16, he had a spinal cord injury from diving off a pier, but his spinal cord's still there. He's not just a head in a box, but for whatever reason, there's a disconnect between his thoughts and his body. If you want a mini example of this, take your middle finger and lay it flat on the table, and then try to raise your ring finger. This one has to be flat. And you can, every once in a while I get a student that can do it, and they got some weird special thing. But you can look at it, you can think about it all you want, you can't move it. Isn't that weird? All right. Along with mind, so this would be things like soul, spirit, metaphysics. This would be like, this would kind of be like this one. Mind would be kind of like your brain. Okay, you got a physical body, you got a brain, you got the physical universe. But see, other philosophers came by after Descartes. Oh, by the way, he died of, I think, like a common cold and wasn't able to answer the critiques of that pineal gland situation. Even if it's true, there's no way to prove that's what's happening. because we can't see that mind-body interplay. Other philosophers, though, saw what he was doing, and they're like, well, why, if God is spirit, why isn't God over here and the physical universe over here? And this will become very significant when we start to see the people that critique it. So you might want to keep this chart handy, the mind-body Cartesian dualism chart, because all the other philosophers in the modern period are going to have to deal with Descartes' issue before they can make their own progressive philosophy. He kind of got us in this knot, this Gordian knot of philosophy that we haven't been able to extract ourselves from. So people use different techniques. And the first out of the chute was named Thomas Hobbes. And you probably know him more from his political theory. He wrote Leviathan, which was this idea that we as individuals give up some of our individual freedom to create like this giant, this government giant that keeps everyone in check and in place. Because without that, it would be tooth and claw. We would all be tearing ourselves apart. So that's how we live in society. We give up a little bit of our individual freedom to empower the government or some force to keep everyone in check and to play nicely. And Hobbes' take on this was, that's really kind of neat, Descartes, but this stuff we really can't know or see or touch or smell or fear. But this stuff we sure can. So why don't we focus on what's real? And he's using theistic language. This is what's so weird about Hobbes. He's talking about God and all this, but remember, he's living in 16th and 17th century Europe. We don't even have a word for atheist yet in European language. And he says, let's just stop playing fantasy games and deal with reality. And so it's like all the way back to the ancient Greek materialist all over again, where the physical is real, everything that's real is physical. We can talk about God and soul and spirit, but that's not really what's happening in this physical material world we're living in. Okay. That's all I'm going to share with you about Hobbes for the sake of this. I want to get to the next guy, whose name is Baruch Spinoza. And Spinoza was a Jewish philosopher, and his family had fled Spain after the Reconquista. If you remember, in 1492, part of why Columbus was able to get the backing of the Spanish crown was they had finally driven the Moors or the Muslims out of Spain. And with that conquest of the Catholic kingdoms of Castile and Leon, driving the Moors out, they gave them a choice. You could either flee, convert, or die. Those were your three options for Muslims and for Jews. So Spinoza's family did not want to convert and they didn't want to die, so they moved to Amsterdam, which like today was a free thought city. And he was brought up in the Jewish community where he learned the Old Testament scriptures, but because of the Dutch, he was also introduced to Christianity and Jesus in the New Testament. And his solution to this problem was to go back to the medieval scholastics and the Shema, which, if you're familiar, in Deuteronomy 6 says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one." And he took this very literally. And so what he's saying is, God is one, the only one. He is the totality of reality. But this one being, this singular substance that the whole universe is comprised of, has infinite modes. We as humans are aware of two of them, thought and extension, or mind and body. But what Spinoza is saying is, these are just two ways of talking about the same thing. And there's all these other ways God can express himself that we're not even aware of as humans. These are the only two we know of, but God has infinite modes of expressions. And so, for example, Spinoza is incredibly comfortable talking about either God or nature, or God or the universe, because there is only one thing, one place, one event. It's all contained in this one. It's like all the way back to Parmenides, right? But now it can be a spiritual one or a physical one. It doesn't matter. It's just two different ways of talking about the same thing. And let me give you an example. He actually has really helped me with the whole free will predestination argument. So think about this morning. All the choices you made to get here to this classroom. And now you're sitting here in your desk, about to leave the room in just a matter of minutes, and there's all these choices, all these potential. You could stay in your chair. You could go out the back door. You could go out the front door. You could go right. You could go left. All these different things you could do. But 10 minutes after I dismiss class, you'll look back, and it will be this, because only one of those potential things will happen. There's only one actual event, time and place, but there's infinite potential. So with the free will predestination piece, we as humans in our perspective are always sitting right here looking into the potential of the future, but God always sees this. But it's the same thing. It's just two different ways of talking about the same thing because only one event ever happens. Fascinating. But this is pantheism now. There is no difference between God and nature. You can talk about the universe or you can talk about God because it's really just the same thing. In fact, they called Spinoza the God-saturated man because he's a mode of God's existence. His thoughts are one way God expresses himself, and his physical body is another way God expresses himself. And God has synced our thoughts and bodies together so that they work in harmony. And we will continue this journey with Leibniz on Thursday. All right, thank you.